I'm Jude Hill, and I've been invited here by Karen and Bec to basically talk about my 3 decades of going through grief.
Hi, welcome to Room to Grieve podcast. We're your hosts, Karen and Bec. Grab yourself a cuppa, find a comfortable spot, and we'll journey through grief together.
Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here today. I'm actually really intrigued to hear how grief has changed and how those experiences have sort of been so different for you, because we spoke briefly before this, obviously, and you've mentioned about how that has changed and how that has created so much difference and how that's actually impacted your grief. So do you want to start with telling us a little bit about why you're here, really about your story and how you came to know grief?
Sure. Well, my first knowing of grief, I had just as a teenager, I'd lost my nan, but that was the only close person that had died, and I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral, etc. So back in 1992, I lost my son Adam, just aged 4, to cancer. I was only 24 myself, so I'd been quite a young mum, and his funeral was the first funeral I'd had to attend. So you guys can put yourself in that place, I'm sure, and imagine how devastating that was. And then it was just a couple of months before what would have been the second anniversary of Adam's death. My dad had a fatal heart attack, totally out of the blue. And then I lost my mum 18 months later. So I did experience quite a bit of grief in quite a short time at quite a young age.
Yeah, you did. And am I right in assuming that at that age, you were probably one of the first in your friendship groups to go through that too?
Yeah, I was the only one at the time when I lost Adam to even have a child at that point. So again, when you was going through things like that, they wanted to be helpful, and they were. One of the things they did, they sort of didn't know what to do. So they thought, we don't want Jude moping about indoors. They didn't obviously put it that way to me at the time. This is a conversation we've had later, and they just thought, we're going to drag her. She's got to come out Friday night, Saturday night with us, even if she doesn't want to, what normal 24-year-olds do. So because that's me, I've always been a bit of a people pleaser. I put on that mask, drunk some alcohol to help, which is something a lot of us turn to in grief as well, just to get through the night, put on that face so they probably thought, oh God, she's coping amazingly. She's out, having a good time on a Saturday night. But then I'm going back and, it's hitting me when I'm alone in the flat. I was a single mum as well. So it was literally no one there. I didn't have a partner or a husband or anything. When I got back, there was just me.
So how did you cope with it then at that age? Was it, you mentioned that you drank a lot, was alcohol one of your coping mechanisms?
So the one key thing was I did return to work quite shortly afterwards. I can't remember the exact amount of time now, but I think it was in maybe even weeks rather than months. And I just went into like robot mode at work, if you like. So I'd got one of my close friends there, because everyone knew he'd obviously had a terminal diagnosis, and I'd been off for some months while we were going through that. So everyone knew that I was the girl in sales, and then word had obviously spread that he died and that sort of thing. But I just said to my friend, just tell everyone not to speak to me about it, because I knew I was just 1 second away from, if someone spoke to me, that's it, I'd be in tears and I wouldn't be able to cope. And it was a bit of necessity. I sort of had to go back to work, because it wasn't like I had a husband that was going to the job and I could have just had more time off and not got a job. And so I wanted to keep the home Adam and I had. That was really important. So I again put on this mask at work. At the time it helped me actually get through the days, rather than just being in bed and getting in that total depression zone, for want of a better word. But I wasn't really dealing with it. And then I went home to the empty house, and I had my moments of different crying when I got home in the evenings and all of that sort of thing. And then most of the weekends were taken up by my friends taking me out. So it was just that time when I was alone. And even my mum said to me sometime afterwards, she said something about, you don't miss Adam as much as we do, because she saw me going back to work and seeming like I was normal and going out with my friends, but it was just all a mask. It wasn't, I wasn't dealing with it. And that really up. I mean, he was close to them as well, because we'd gone to, I'd moved back into their house, and he actually passed away in their home. But I didn't think I'd get so emotional now. It just takes you back to that moment, doesn't it, Beth?
Right, to that, yeah.
That words did really cut, because I thought nobody knows how I'm feeling inside.
I suppose you were just on automatic pilot, wasn't you, for so long, and not knowing that there was other options. You just sort of carry on, and you just get through a day at a time on automatic pilot, and you're numb, really.
Yeah.
You're only letting yourself feel the bare minimum of feelings, because of you took all them feelings on at that time. Could have been quite different.
I can easily see, with all my hindsight and all the things I've done recently and that going back, how easy it would be to get stuck in that. So I mean, I've always been quite independent person myself in anyhow, and my mum was quite strong. She was like, "Oh, you just get on with it," sort of thing. They would both of the parents.
I was going to say, do you think that is a bit more of a thing, sort of 32 years ago? That was just, grief was something that you maintained for private, and
oh, definitely. I mean, it's not. I still don't think it's talked about enough now in the wider instances. It's great. Obviously, you guys doing this podcast, and there are other grief podcasts, but then it's only people that have been touched so severely by that are really listening to it. I think there's a lot more education at the wider level, and even people saying, we've all had it, and I read it in the groups all the time where people say, all the platitudes and loss and that, but until you've been through something, especially something like child loss, when I lost my parents afterwards, they were devastating losses, but it wasn't anything compared to losing Adam, sort of thing. When my dad first went as well, part of me was like, oh, well, at least he's there looking after Adam now. I had this, I wasn't mega religious or anything at the time, but it was one of the coping mechanisms that, I like to think that he was in heaven, or, whatever, like that sort of thing. So I thought, oh, he's got granddad with him now. And then when my mum went, he's like, oh, they're both there with him now, because he sort of, it's strange now, 30 odd years on, to think that he would be a grown man, especially seeing his brothers here now. But he's still sort of that little 4-year-old boy to me, really.
A personal question I probably have there is, for me, I always wonder, in 10 years' time, am I going to forever see Bradley as an 18-year-old? And I wonder how that will look for me, that his friends are all coming up 30, but Bradley will be forever 18. And that's something that actually plays on my mind of, like, am I supposed to react to Bradley as him growing? I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but mentally, I really struggle with that.
Yeah, so do you see Adam as always being 4 when you think of Adam, or do you... I know there's times you're going to think, oh, he'd be doing this now, he'd be doing that, but your first initial thought is that of Adam as...
Yeah, I do think of him as a little boy, which, is really good, but I think it's different how you go. I've never been at times or a date person that much. It would be things that would trigger me, like I'd see his favourite cake in the baker's shop or something like that, and I think like that, or where I see some of the old toys. But I think if people are more, and I think it depends as well, because obviously that's one of the things, the world's a very different place now. Social media, the internet didn't exist when I was grieving back then, so there wasn't this level of comparison, and because my friends didn't have other children, it wasn't really until, for the listeners, I went on to have 2 other boys 6 and 8 years after I lost Adam. And with that, it was more when they come to those points, like he didn't even quite get to do his first day at school. So it was those poignant ones, as and then when they grew up and they were doing other things as they grew, and especially like through the teenage years, it was weird. I'd had another child. I was sort of like an experienced mum in that sense, but I was like first time mum going through the teenage years. So yeah, it is a little bit strange, but yeah, I do still think of him in general as being that little boy like that in a different, I've got into energy, and I sort of just connect with his essence more than anything now. But but there was definite moments when my boys hit other milestones, and it was strange because it was always missing what would have been their big brother. You know, he would have been supporting them when Nathan started secondary school, if he was at the same school, and you know, all things like that.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because things like your second son, when you was taking him to school, his first day at school, it's sort of, as exciting as it is, it's everything is tinged with a little bit of sadness, isn't it? Even years on,
and you know, there wasn't anyone to share it with really, because their dad wasn't Adam's dad, so, and the same, my parents had even gone by that point. They internalized things for many years, so it wasn't until over 20 years later when my grief resurfaced that I actually properly, what I would say, you know, looked at it and dealt with it. And I think that's the thing with a lot of people, you know, you go, there's many different routes you can go, but a lot of people go down that numbing route and suppressing it, especially I think back then. And that's where I was saying, like, grief had changed, because at least there are more options now, sort of thing. You know, there's counselling, there's different charities do different things, there's other different therapies that have evolved more recently that sometimes people get access to use through the grief route. So, and just even coming into community, even things like what you're doing here just wasn't possible back then. And you know, all the other things, all the Facebook groups that, you know, bereaved parents are in and things, there was no way where you could just discuss it. So unless you randomly happen to know someone, and there wasn't anyone close to me, we'd gone to London. I live in Kent, so it's not a million miles away, for the hospital treatments. But I don't know whether it was maybe being young, being a single mum, although I spoke to the other parents, I always felt quite separate, so there wasn't anyone that I'd really gelled with, that I had another, you know, conversation or friendship with following that. So yeah, there wasn't really anyone. And I can't remember, I think I may have been offered counselling, if anything, at the time, but I thought, what's the point? They can't give me the one thing that I want, which is Adam back. So what's the point of, you know? And I knew I was on that brink of talking about it then.
Do you think now, thinking back, when you was offered counselling, if you knew what you knew now, that everything had resurfaced, do you think you would have taken that counselling?
I'm still not sure, maybe. I think it's got its place. It does get a certain amount out of it, but sometimes it is just spilling it out, and then it's
just talking. Yeah, just talking, getting it out. Even if somebody doesn't understand, they can sit and listen.
Yeah, and I think, it's just hard to have those conversations. So what you're doing here, with it being, you know, really raw and being still relatively soon for you guys as well, I think that comes across well.
Well, thank you. You said you went on to have 2 more boys.
Yeah.
Was it 6 and 8 years after Adam died?
Yeah.
So did you choose to keep Adam an active part of their life?
Yeah, so then I was still really regularly going to the graveside. You know, it was that desperate thing. I think we just want to feel close to them still, so we do whatever it is. So then that was, you know, in my little mind, that was the place where he was. So I used to go and tend the grave and that, but there was just some disconnection there, sort of thing. I never really felt connected at that point, sort of thing. It was, you know, not that you could in any way overemphasize it. You know, even if you was burying it well inside, you know, deep inside, you knew you were missing them. It just sort of made me almost a little bit upset, going, you know, it shouldn't be that you're going to visit your child at graveside. You know, it's just wrong on all levels. But I think I'd got to enough of a point, and I didn't actually. It was my then fiance stroke husband's decision to have kids. He sort of pushed me. He was actually a bit younger than me, but he was like, I think he'd got that image that you have of, you know, the happy family and that sort of thing, and just wanted kids. And like I was at first, I was like, oh no, you're young, sort of thing, and you know, we want to live a bit more before that, sort of thing. And he was like, no, I'm ready, and sort of don't. And then obviously it happened, so there wasn't really a choice after that. But yeah, and now looking back, I realise it was a lot of fear. Oh my God, if I have another child again, God forbid anything happened, that would be it, sort of thing, So I think it was very fearful time. And then I did have a miscarriage in between the two sons I've got as well. So that almost drove me crazy then, it's in a different way, but it was still, oh my God, it's happening again. I think the only thing that got me through that was luckily I'd still got Nathan at that point. So it was like literally holding him. I've got, I've still got him.
Yeah. I think that's going to be with us forever. I mean, my son's 21 and we're in Spain at the moment, and he was poorly last night, and your brain goes,
yeah,
it's only got a temperature and a sore throat. It just goes into overtime, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think even we've been poorly, me and Bec, it's all stress related and that, but straight away it's in us now, and we're going to fear the worst. Yeah. And it's
my default is worst case scenario.
Yes. Yeah. That's something we've got to live with, and I think probably most people do.
I think it's human nature. Brené Brown does a good take on it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Child, it's just humans' natural instinct sometimes to go to worst case scenario, isn't it, over things? But when you
I've got a mozzie bite on my neck. There, right.
That's what she's saying.
And obviously, by the end of the day, it'll be skin cancer in my head.
Yeah, getting back to the question. So when the boys come along, obviously they were very little, but we used to go and visit the graves. So literally from babies to toddlers, and then Daniel come along. So, and I think again at that point I'd got very used to putting on a brave face in a lot of different scenarios. I didn't show what I was feeling, what's sort of coming out now. Then so I managed to put it in a good way, and obviously they didn't have those grandparents as well, so it's like, oh, Nanny and Granddad's here and your brother's here, and I always tried to put that sort of energy into it at the time. So, and then obviously at home and showing what pictures I had, there wasn't that many, because it wasn't like again now where you've got your phone in your hand constantly, and you've got pictures and videos, hundreds of them there, so there wasn't that many. So it was just talking about them, and I suppose it was you just do it subconsciously at the time. But looking back now, it's probably trying to get the right balance. Like Christmas was obviously always a difficult time, missing him. So Christmas Eve, we'd do the thing. It was just the ritual that we got into. We'd go to the graveside, we'd put something down for Adam, tidy it up and that sort of thing, have a little bit of time there. And then I'd switch back to going back and getting things ready and, being all happy and excited Christmas Day, especially when they were small at that, because, they're just little children. You can't, and, hats off to both of you that have got other children, trying to, deal with both and that sort of thing is the whole, I can't comment so much on that because I'd been further through my grief by the time, so it was in a different vein. But you just do what you've got to do, really. You put on that, but there was still that bit again looking back now, and it wasn't like I actually realised consciously at the time how sad I was in one way. It was just all, you're doing that mum thing like you always do, the best for your kids and make Christmas lovely. And I didn't realise how much of that pain I was trapping away until the grief did resurface.
Oh, bless you. Yeah, it just sounds crazy tough, but then it's all really tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's every single part of it. Do you think your boys grieve for Adam? Do you think that they still have their own grief? Do you still have to monitor that, like, as they've got older, because they're adults now, right? So do you think that's something they've had to try and understand and deal with?
It's strange, really. I think not in a way. It was like I said to you when we had our chat the other day, the one time that it really hit me that he was with them as much as he was, sort of thing, was many years later. I was picking up my eldest from his first part-time job, and he's got Asperger's, so he does everything quite black and white sometimes with things. And I said something, and then he said, oh, I always talk about Adam at work. And I was like, oh, and it really, especially outside of the family arena, although obviously we've done all those years of visiting the grave, and then even those had dwindled as the boys got a little bit older, just because I was busy working and running them around to their clubs and dealing with all of that. And it was like, And, you know, even now, like, and then my youngest the other day on Snapchat just put up a picture because his girlfriend lives nearer where the graveside is now, and he'd just been down there, and it was just a photo of the graveside. So he'd taken himself down there to, you know, go and visit him. So, and that's the thing I always try and get across to people when I meet now, because obviously when we lose them, they're gone and they're so physically gone, and, you know, all their stuff's still there, and you till you've lost a child, you can't even describe how painful missing them is. But we still can have a connection with them. You know, my boys are only really half blood related through me as well, never met because they come along years later, but because of my stories and my sharing, they do know and they do feel that they've got a brother. So they haven't outwardly said things about missing them, but it's just the little things like that come up that, you know,
that's lovely.
They have still got that family connection. Yeah.
It's like a healthy way of dealing with it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, like, not to say there's a right and wrong way, but to talk about it to them and to do it how you've done, I think it's amazing.
And I think it was good that I'd had that gap in a way with those years where I'd push through the worst of the pain, if there's a way to say it like that, rather than having to try and deal with it when it's so raw. That must be so much harder when you're literally in the midst of your own deep dark grief and you're trying to help your children as well. But be honest and open as you can. I think that's a way where what has changed across those sort of years is that in general we are being a little bit more open emotionally now with things in the wider world, but I think it still could be more than what it is as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
You said your grief sort of you've mentioned a couple of times that it resurfaced after about the 20-year point. Do you think that there was a specific reason for that? Do you think you just suppressed it so long that you couldn't anymore? Like, do you think that there was parts of it you hadn't revisited enough, you know, and dealt with enough in the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I hadn't really done what I would say any work on it. It was all how I describe it, just pushing through. And I was triggered by a video at a work event, and I was so shocked when it first came up, and, you know, people were going, "Oh, I know it's sad, Jude, but, you know, it's not that bad." And then, of course, it all spurted out, "Oh, no, but I lost my son." And then they sort of realised why the video had triggered me so much, and everyone was nice. And even the lady that was running the course, I knew her before doing the course. She was like, "Oh, I know it's a long time ago, Jude, but, you know, maybe you need to seek some help, you know, from a professional." And I was like, and, you know, then I was like, no, I'm fine. And I, you know, especially with having to deal with it when, you know, the other boys come along and all the things I'd done then, I was just so, it was a shock of why was it so vigilant, you know, why had I been taken back to that point? And then I didn't do anything with it at the time. I pushed it back in its box and sat firmly on the lid and thought, I'll just carry on. And, you know, I was fine in general life after that. And then it wasn't until a few months later I was away on a retreat weekend, and then that was really when everything changed. It came up, and I did some healing work on it that week, and that was probably a story for another day on all of
definitely,
that.
Definitely a story for another day.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're both very interested in.
And then it's just going back from that triggered me to then join some of the Facebook groups and things and see what was out there in that sense of thing. And then that was when I thought there isn't really enough. It's better than it was, you know, back then. At least people have got these spaces. But again, sometimes it's that, it's all getting it out. But there's not a way of how do we deal with that? You know, there's still enough help for people of what do they do from there? You know, how can they, you know, move forward, for want of a better phrase?
It's that whole thing of grief needs a witness, doesn't it? Grief needs to be seen. Like, you know, I find being very open about what we're going through, I find that really validating for me, quite cathartic for me. It really helps. But, you know, and I just think it is that grief actually is a lot easier to cope with if it's shared.
Yeah. No, I didn't have anyone really to share it with at the time. And since then, I've had a few conversations. I've just got a couple of school friends that were about back then, so they know both sides of things. But yeah, it's still, like now, like one of them said the other day, oh, if it was now, we'd sit down and we'd talk about it. But, bless them, like they were only 24-year-old, girls sort of thing. I feel like I'm more of a woman now at my age. But there was like, oh, they had no skills, no, God, how do we deal with this, so it is good now that, and I think some, not all, but some of the youngsters do talk, but then they still internalise things as well. I know that for a few things my youngest is going through on his journey at the moment, so it's not where it could be by any means, even though it's more talked about.
And it's just so interesting, for me especially, just to sort of see just how different things were and that compared to now, and the stages that you've gone through. And weirdly, I find it really comforting, and please don't take this the wrong way, that you are still really upset, because I really worry about this whole minimizing everything and it getting easier. And I actually don't want that, because I still want to hold on to all of this pain and all of this sadness in some way, because I don't ever want to get to a place where I feel comfortable with Bradley's death, and I don't want to get to a place where I might not think of him so often. So weirdly, in my space where I sit at the moment, I find it really comforting that is still something that I will have to deal with forever, because that feels like my connection to him. And I get that probably sounds weird to other people, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, it's strange. I think the thing is, because, for want of a better word, it's trauma and all of the relatively minor things that happen on your journey, and that obviously it's all part of those, and you've got all those points it's triggered. So just talking about it again, which is why I didn't talk about it for many years, and why when I first went back to work, my friend had to tell everyone not to ask me, otherwise you can't be, and I'm so much better now. This is nothing to what I would have been then. I probably wouldn't have been able to carry on speaking afterwards, but it's still, because your mind just instantly, it goes back even all those years to the the poignant things, and that emotion just does still rise up. Obviously it's not as prevalent as it was back there, and you can deal with it, but I think you've not got heart if you're completely cut off by that. But there is also that phase of not living, and that's what breaks my heart sometimes as well, when I see other parents really totally constantly stuck in that sadness, and you do feel it like that, because the sadness and the pain is what, like you say, is what still feels you connected to them, because that's that biggest thing at the time. But don't believe they would want us to be like that. I've heard your story of how Bradley pushed through, and same with Adam. He went through 3 years of cancer treatment on and off, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and he was so brave. And that was one of the things that I remember that moment, even back then at 24, I was like, oh, you're in that totally unbearable pain that only other bereaved mums can understand, and because it's all the same. But I couldn't imagine ever not feeling that pain, because it's just so desperate and so overwhelming at that point. But equally, I thought, oh my God, I'm 24. If I live to a very lowish average expectancy of back then, of like in my 60s, I've got 40 years of this. I thought I can't live 40 years in this amount of pain. This is ridiculous. Even that was with, outwardly looking okay sort of thing, at work and things, but the truth of what you feel inside, and that was that pivotal point where I thought, right, I've got to make myself push through this and go, and that was my thing, to, as much as you could, get away from the pain a bit now. And now, with the hindsight of looking back, I think the earlier you can get help, and you can work with your emotions, and you can let them out in whatever way works for you, then that's better. And then you can start to use the other time to rebuild your life, because it is like rebuilding the whole life again.
Yeah, it's like, Bec's going to hate me for saying this, but it's like balance, isn't it? And
I'm a Libra, so I totally get balance.
Yeah, and that bloody word.
Against one.
Yeah, you've got your balance in your head every single day, because you bring forward your brain. You can't control what your brain brings forward, and you bring forward trauma about what you went through all them years ago when you know, like, you're 4-year-old. It's how can there not be trauma there? So then you've got to think, haven't you, of let's bring some happier moments in. Let me bring, you know, like, to try and balance them out, not cancel them out. They're never going to be cancelled out. They're there. That trauma is there. But if you can, like, dilute it a little bit with happier moments, it just makes for an easier day, doesn't it? Even all these years on.
Definitely. And there's so many triggering points. You know, for some people it's more dates. Say for me, it would just be more specific things that would remind you of something. But, you know, now, like, one of the few photographs I've got of him was in the when he was after the terminal diagnosis. We went to stay with my friend in Blackpool, and Batman was one of his heroes, and we went to the Madame Tussauds waxworks there. So I've got a photo of me holding him next to the Batman figure. And when I used to look at that, I used to just see how poorly he looked in that photo. Whereas now I look back and I remember, you know, he didn't, he probably did, but he didn't really realise it was a waxwork. You know, it was back in the day then. 4-year-olds were different to how 4-year-olds are now, even with the techno age. So he was next to his hero. He was having a whale of a time.
Yeah, so because
I can take myself back to the happy moments we had.
Yeah, because you could look at that photo and you could say, oh, look how poorly he is, look how pale he is, and did lost the hair. But you could then think, you know what, he bloody loved that day.
Yeah.
He bloody loved Batman. And, you know, like...
it's a mindset shift.
Change it so easily. And some days you can, and other days you can't.
Yeah.
I was going to say, some days that's just impossible to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, some days I can look at pictures and I can look at videos, and other days I can't even look at them.
Yeah.
Do you still feel like that, Jude, after all this time? People's hope. You can lie. Right, just lie. Okay, no.
So there's things like that. I haven't got many pictures, so there's not loads. Like, sometimes I think, and there is some bits where, like, you do say, oh God, it's faded, but then there's little sparks of memories that are just really bright, and there must have been enough for the boys I've got now to be connected with him and whatever I relayed. You know, none of it was, well, I suppose part of it must have been some conscious thing. It's like, oh, I want to talk about Adam because I want them to know about him, sort of thing. But I think a lot of it was unconscious as well, sort of thing. And yeah, I believe it was him helping me get to know them as well. And yeah, that's the biggest thing that's come out of my most recent healing, that, you know, we are all one and we are all connected. So that's where I say to, you know, bereaved parents where they feel that they're losing that connection. And like you said, Bex, you think, oh God, if you lose that sadness, you're going to lose that connection. But you won't. You know, my boys have never physically met, but they've still got that connection, and they never even met. So, you know, you guys have got years of
so you say it, you can still have
children and that. So their energy is still alive with you, is what I believe. You know, they're still part of you, and you know, you're lucky in that sense that you've got each other. You know, you've got your partners and your other children, and yeah, I would just say, as painful as it can be, and if tears come like this as you're talking about it, then that's all part and parcel about it. But just keep talking about it with it. And everyone's different. Some people, you know, again, I've heard stories where people say, I've tried to talk to my daughter about it because I think she's grieving her brother or whatever, but she just doesn't want to talk. And sometimes that would be that person's way of coping. But I think all you can be there is there knowing that you're ready, you know, and they can talk to you, and that just try and be as open as possible. But some people's way will be just shutting it. It'll just be their way of dealing with it, because maybe like me, it would have been too painful to talked too much at the time.
Yeah.
And when you sort of revisited your grief at that 20-year point, you kind of, and this is another thing that I struggle to kind of come to terms with, is you kind of found a bit more of a purpose, didn't you? I hate the fact that there has to be a purpose and a meaning in grief and something to come out of it. I get it. I totally understand it. I just don't really, like that there has to be. But yeah, you kind of found your own little purpose, didn't you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So, even just at the first healing retreat where it all came out, and I helped with it was actually the lady that was running it, and she said, well, maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing at the moment. Well, I'd come there to get help with, but maybe you should be helping other bereaved parents. And I was like, oh, I totally went back to me, little old Jude, even 20 years later as a grown woman, I'm not one of those that's really out there and Larry and, and it's like, well, how can I help, sort of thing. And like one of the things that she said at the end was, well, what would you want for another bereaved parent? And through tears at the time again, I was like, oh, just want them to be happy. And it just does sound so off, because happiness just seems so far away from anything. You think, how can you be happy? And you're holding on to all of that sadness. But as much as we don't want it in one sense, life does go on. Well, other children, sort of thing, you've got to think of them as well. And for me, when my other children came along, even those years later, it was putting my sadness away for them, because we wanted that happiness and we wanted to make the best of life. And I just feel that Adam would want us to as well. Even for all his journey on his cancer treatment, he was never really unhappy about it. Luckily, in one way, I think he was too young to know the full depths as an older child would. But even all the children I remember in the hospital back then, they were all just so fantastic how they got on with it and just accepted the treatment. I'm not saying they didn't have their odd bad days where they went into one, but they didn't. Like, one of the strange memories that does make me sort of chuckle in one sense now that I've got of Adam was when he was about 2 and he was hooked up via the Hickman line to the drip and that, and like toddler running around, and I'm running around with one of the, I can't think what they're called, the wheelie trolley things that the back of medicines in, trying to catch up with things, sort of thing. And just crazy things like that. But now, obviously it was sad and I wouldn't want him hooked up to that, but it does just make me chuckle now. It was part of our life, that sort of thing was our life on and off. And then one of the other things, once he didn't get to school, but he did go to nursery, and he said to another little boy at nursery, oh, what hospital do you go to? He's been in and out of hospital since 18 months. So from his memory, when you can remember and speak, he thought, like everyone goes to school, he thought everyone goes to hospital.
Bless him.
See, that you could take that, you could be so sad about that, couldn't you? Oh, it's not fair that's how we have to think. But to turn that into a positive and actually laugh about it, it's what we've got to do. Isn't it? It's got you, things like that have got you to where you are today. With a life, because you could so easily not have had a life with all what you went through. You really could.
But that's my things. I think we've all, and we're often told, aren't we, that, oh, you're so strong and that sort of thing from people outside that don't know what they're going through and that. But it is whatever way of finding, it's one sense, not in the way it's said like that, but your own inner strength to go on for you. And I truly believe that all our children would want us to carry on for
100%.
They wouldn't want us to, and even a little bit from the podcasts I've heard of you two talking about yours is, they were so full of life, and they want you to be still carrying on full of life. Yeah, I'm sure they'd be really proud of what you're doing as well.
I'm not sure Emily would be. Emily would definitely be hiding somewhere.
She'd be like, I get my two now, like, you're an embarrassment, mother.
Yeah. Bradley would be, but my other 3 at the moment, none of them have listened to it. None of them have any interest in it. I think they all cringe. Zachary said to me the other day, comes up on my For You page, Mum, and I just scroll really quickly.
There's more scroll.
When I did my book launch, upset both of them got as I was doing my speech, and I was like, oh, I couldn't look at anyone in the room that day. I think wherever I was looking, there was tears. It was like, oh, I've got to look ahead and just talk. The one thing I think is that time alone doesn't heal. You finding your own way of working with your grief and looking at it, and your own way to move forward with the life that you've got now. And it's you can't live in the past as well. So, one of the things I do with what I do now, it's like timelines sort of thing. So if you stay stuck in the past, you want to keep the memories and things, but not to stay stuck and frozen in that point. And it is really hard to do at some points, but it is to find your own way to move forward. But I think expressing your grief and definitely talking about it and not putting it away and trying to avoid as much as you can. Sometimes you need those numbing tactics. It is just to get through the day, like nobody talking to you about it at work or the drink and that. But as long as it's not too excessive, that's what I see sometimes, where people are really stuck in that point and they haven't found someone, another good friend that they can fully express and talk with, or a good therapist or counsellor or something like that to get it. It is that way of trying to find your outlet, or some people it's therapy, it's finding a hobby, art or something like that, just something, and there's healing in that, even if you don't realise there is. So and just you can I'm proof of it. I know obviously I've got upset at a couple of points with the poignance coming here, but overall, and that's one of the things when I had my realisation when the grief did surface 20 odd years later and I dealt with it, I realised although I had been living life in some way at that point, I hadn't been living it at 100% as well. There was a lot of me that was there because I hadn't worked through that grief and done those things, whereas now, and obviously it's still upsetting in that point, and even today I always used to say back then I would swap places with him in an instant if that was possible. My only other reservation now would be to know how much harder it is for the people that are left behind, and it would just be the worry of my other sons not having me, sort of thing. But other than that, even all these years later, if it was possible, you could click your fingers and it could happen. You'd do it. But I think that's just as a mother, you want to do everything you can, for your children, and you put yourself in harm's way for them. So I think that's just natural instinct. But
it's sort of guilt of moving on, but it's not moving on. You think, what would people think about me because I'm doing this? And then even not just about people, about what you think of yourself. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be happy. I shouldn't be positive. And that's sort of what you've got to get through, isn't it? It's your own guilt and every other emotion that's thrown in with that guilt.
Yeah, guilt's definitely a massive one. But that's what I believe as well, is that none of our children want us to be happy. They know how much we love them and what we did for them, and we would have done anything and that sort of thing, and we'd want that. And they wouldn't want us to be stuck in this misery. You're going to have moments of it, but
nothing that we do is going to bring them back.
No,
so we may as well do something.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so carry on and make a life, like you said, because at the time, like, you think there's no way you'll have a life ever again.
No,
there is. It's just a different life, and we can choose to do different things within it at different stages. And if we do this, that, the other, and then in 5 years' time think back, I don't want to do that now. I need to change. You might need to change because of your feelings for them, because of your grief, because it's resurfaced. Exactly like you've done, right? That wasn't working. This has come up in my head, so I've got to deal with it. So you've dealt with it. So you're evolving, aren't you, through the rest of your life, using different things to get you through. the next
So,
stage.
no one's ever perfect. There's not a perfect way of dealing with it. But yeah, just being open, I think, is and reaching into your heart for, okay, what do I truly feel I should do in my heart as well with this sort of thing. And let it, easier said than done, but yeah, let go of the guilt, any guilt that you've got, because they wouldn't want that. And any choices you made at the time, you did that with the best intention because you thought that was the best way at the time. And I think whatever the circumstances, we've all got guilt over things that happen with the doctors, or if it's a different instance like an accident, you think, God, why didn't I go and pick them up that time? I've done a few crazy early hours in the morning where I've gone to pick my sons now, like we said earlier.
I'm going for it, yes.
You just live in that panic zone, whereas they just wouldn't want us to be stuck in this sadness, is the thing.
100%. They just wouldn't. Yeah.
And there's a middle ground. It's not like obviously you suddenly go to like, oh yeah, that's it, that sort of thing. But it's we've got this life, and you've got to try and live it as best you can. And I look back, nothing's been perfect, sort of thing. And you could change things, but I feel like I was half living a life for many years. So now that's my encouragement on all people to really just what do you really want? Feeling to your heart, and just go with that.
Yeah, little bit at a time. Yeah. Just let a little bit in, and then you'll see, as time goes, that you can let a little bit more in every day. And
I think so. And you said about not living in the past, and I think everything that you've told us this morning is testament that not living in the past doesn't mean leaving them behind. That you've very much brought Adam with you throughout, your journey through the last 30 odd years. So, and I think that's amazing, and that's a great reassurance and a comfort that, that's still possible, and that you don't have to keep yourself stuck where you were, that even just moving through life, you can still take them with you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I hope they'll be forever part of your family. No one can take that away. They're physically gone, but that's it. My saying is, that they're in your heart forever, and your soul bond with them can never be broken. So, you can have that connection whenever you choose. It's finding how you connect.
Do you feel proud of yourself for getting this far, for bringing him with you?
Sometimes I think, I'm not really anything special. You just did it, and it was by instinct to that. A lot of it now, I feel it was him guiding me. This is me getting into my bit of side of things, that we'll have a conversation on that another day. But and even back then, some of the things I did back then, I still think I had no idea it was guidance at the time, but I think it just was in some of the things I did. Like, I did give away quite a lot of his things at the time, and kept a few things to the Macmillan Cancer Charity, because they were just the Macmillan nurse I had was a godsend. She was the only sort of counsellor person I had in the professional world, and I thought, well, it's not going to make very much, but if that can make use for someone else and make us a small contribution, it can. So you just got to feel right, what's right for you. So for some people, holding on to their things is right, but if and again, it's another big one, like, what do you do if they've had their own room? Do you keep it like that or change it? But again, just feel what's right for you. But if every time you go in there it makes you really sad, then that would be my advice point. It's something to do to change around it. I had a story the other day, I can't remember where it was on one of the groups, but they changed the bedroom. They love music, so they'd done it into a bit of a mixer of music rooms, woke chilling, so they kept a mix of both, and I just thought that was lovely. And that's another different way of bringing the, keeping the energy there as well, so you can have your special areas and things and still have them with you. And that's my biggest thing. I don't know how I did it in some ways back then, but keeping on that brave face and talking about Adam, obviously it's worked with the way that they're still connected to him now, so they didn't miss out on their big brother in some ways.
Not at all. Oh, well, we really appreciate you sharing your story and Adam's story with us today. For me, it's been really interesting, and I've really enjoyed listening to it, and it's been really helpful actually, and kind of, a little bit reassuring for me.
I can't wait to our next podcast. That's like really. There are some skeptics in the room. I'm not staring at anybody in particular. So yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting more on that as well.
I've already noticed that Jude's necklace is
yes, she's got a rose quartz pendulum.
Yeah. I've already picked up on that. But your pendulum that you talked to Emily on is the same as Jude's necklace, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my friends, she does memorial jewellery as well. So she put ashes in them and that as well. So I think
that's lovely, yeah.
Fantastic thing, yeah. I mean, Adam was buried rather than cremated because, again, at the time, it's just the stupid things that go in your brain. Like, I mean, didn't want to do either, but it was like, I cannot burn his body was my thinking back then. Like, so, oh God, it'll have to be a burial, and now I think, it would be... if it had to happen, it would be nice to have ashes and have them in a lovely necklace that I could wear. But
when you think about it, Jude, would you just think about that one question when you was 24? Do you want your son buried or cremated?
Yeah.
How on earth do you recover from that?
Yeah,
it hits home something like that, doesn't it?
That's
what
it.
you do. You got through that day and the day after and the day after that. And all these years later, you can still talk about Adam, with a tear, but with a smile as well.
That's it, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's, they're with us forever. They're part of you.
So yeah.
It's just getting over our mindset that, because we live in this very physical world and material world more than ever these days. And some people just can't get past that point. But that's the... thing, finding a way.
And it's funny how some people, the dates are a big thing. I mean, it was Emily's first anniversary a couple of days ago, and everybody says, "Look, thinking of you today," and all that. Love the messages, but you think today's no different than yesterday or tomorrow. I still miss her just as much. Think about her every day, please, not just the one day.
Yeah, I was a bit random like that. Yeah, dates didn't mean it wasn't till, and I think it was quite some time later that I sort of looked, because obviously there was a few years in between. But strangely enough, the day Adam passed was actually my husband, or ex-husband now, but then husband's birthday.
Oh,
so that's quite random.
We're very connected, me and you, Jude, because. When I actually went to register Emily's death, and the registrar sent me the thing over, and I noticed the date, it was my birthday.
Oh,
and I
which
forgot.
Is today, by the way. So happy birthday,
no,
Karen.
No, actually wishing happy birthday. I'll just point that out. Just
well, you didn't want to celebrate your birthday, so I was like,
I've got 22 bites on my legs, and I'm trying my best to twitch. I'm going to forget.
You didn't want to celebrate your birthday, so I chose not to acknowledge it. But as soon as you've mentioned it, I'm allowed to say happy birthday now.
Do we sing?
No,
nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
I don't expect to sing. Or Richie now. I've got cockroach issues. I'm now thinking I've got cockroaches in my hair.
I'm like that if I watch animal programs and they're like, suddenly now it's just
program. Go and look at the tree in the back garden. It's actually moving.
Oh, really? Do they need to come and fumigate the tree?
Yeah.
Can you just cut the tree down?
It's already cut down. It's all coming out of the ground. It's moving. So
there's some nasty things about hot countries. We're not really jealous much. It's quite warm here for the last few days.
Oh, she's going to put a jumper on in a minute.
Yeah, it's gone a bit chilly here, so I don't cope very well. I mean, Monday, what was it? It was 27 degrees, and I still had a hoodie on.
Oh, God.
I don't get warm very easily. Never mind. Right.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much, Jude.
Yes.
It's all right. I hope there's not too much editing in that.
It's probably just your dog. How will you get the dog back, Don't
know yet. I'll run it through a sound app and see what happens.
You might just have to have a stutter, like we were just like...
It's like I have to run it for a nap because Karen normally moves so much. I have to get out.
Itching, a tap.
Yeah.
I can't.
She does this and she leans forward so much that a mic moves and a camera moves. And right, who wants to do the sign-off, Karen?
Remind me again what I say.
She's awful. Honestly, that is genuinely nothing ever put on for the podcast. She genuinely doesn't know it.
I had a really good question for you, Jude.
Yeah, go on.
Got it. Right. By the time I walked out the bedroom into the lounge with my pen, I forgot the question. My head's just working. My brain's absolutely voice fucked forever. So, to edit the F word out. Yeah. So, no, I forgot it. You'll have to do it back.
Terrible. So grab your... No, I've forgotten it.
Start.
I told you we need to sing. We need to sing. Let's talk about Dad, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
I can't sing.
Can you sing, Jude?
No. I'd be the one emptying the room. One of my ex-boyfriends used to do karaoke, so they'd get me singing at the end if they wanted to close the pub down.
So we've been, and Emily goes, Mum, never go on X Factor, will you? Right, come on, Bec. I need to go and be breakfast.
Right, go on then. So grab yourself a cuppa, find a comfortable spot, and we'll navigate through grief together. Thanks.
Thanks, Jude.
Cheers,
Bye.
Jude.
You're welcome.